I never thought I'd wake up at 3 in the morning to find my life ripped away, not by strangers, but by the very people who shared my table and called me Mom. The first alert buzzed so faintly on my nightstand that I thought I was dreaming. I reached for my glasses, still foggy with sleep, and pressed the screen. Withdrawal alert, $5,000. My heart gave a jump. Maybe it was a mistake. Banks made mistakes sometimes. I was about to set it down when the second one came. Then the third. By the time I rubbed my eyes clear enough to read properly, there were 12 of them. 12 alerts, all saying the same thing. Large withdrawals, one after another. I sat straight up in bed, my chest pounding harder than it had in years. My room was dark except for the faint glow of the phone. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Then another alert buzzed. 13th withdrawal. Then 14th. In 15 minutes, 79 notifications filled the screen. 79. My hand trembled as I scrolled through the list, the numbers blurring together. By the end of it, the total was gone. All of it. My $3.2 million, the money I had saved, invested and protected since my husband Robert died, had vanished before I even blinked. I sat there frozen. The kind of frozen where you don't even cry. Just hollow. Empty. My breath caught in my throat, and I clutched the blanket as though it could anchor me to something real. I wasn't poor. I wasn't helpless. I was 78 years old, and I had built every bit of that money with grit. Robert and I started with nothing. He worked double shifts at the factory, and I cleaned houses until my back nearly gave out. We pinched pennies until they screamed, raised our son and daughter with the promise that one day, when the gray years came, we'd be safe. I thought that day had arrived. Until tonight. I tapped the bank app. My fingers slipped on the glass, slick with sweat. Password. Face ID. Nothing worked. Every time I tried to log in, the screen flashed access denied. It was like watching a thief run away with your suitcase at the station while you're tied to the bench. I wasn't a fool. I had set up my accounts carefully. Double verification, strict limits. Only one other person knew the backup codes. My son, Mark. The realization struck harder than any storm. Mark was 43. My boy with the wild cowlick I used to smooth down before school. He grew up watching me struggle and vowed to make something of himself. He became a financial advisor, of all things. Sharp suit, polished shoes, and a smile that could talk anyone into signing anything. He told me years ago, "Mom, you shouldn't worry about keeping track of all those passwords. Let me help you. I'll set up safeguards." I thought he was protecting me. Tonight, I realized he was protecting himself. My stomach churned as I remembered the conversation 2 weeks ago. I was at the kitchen table, sorting bills, when he leaned against the counter with that smooth grin. "You know, Mom, it might be better if we consolidate your accounts. Easier to manage. Less stress for you." I'd brushed it off. I've managed fine for nearly 80 years. He chuckled and kissed my forehead, but his eyes lingered too long on the checkbook. The phone buzzed again, this time not an alert but a text. It was from him. "Don't panic. Everything's fine. I'll explain tomorrow. Everything's fine. $3.2 million fine." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the phone against the wall. But instead, I sat there in the quiet house, staring at the glowing words, my heart breaking into sharper pieces than I'd ever felt. What mother imagines her child would rob her? What mother imagines the boy she rocked to sleep, the boy who cried when his dog died, would sit behind a computer and strip her bare? The darkness pressed in. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and felt the carpet under my toes. My hands trembled, but my mind strangely began to clear. I'd lived through worse. Robert's death. Cancer at 62. Losing my sister in a car accident. Every time, I found a way to stand again. And tonight, I swore I would. I reached for the lamp and turned it on. The room filled with warm light, catching the silver frames on my dresser. Robert's picture stared back at me. His steady eyes seemed to say, "Don't fold, Ruth. Don't you dare fold." I whispered to him like I always did when no one was around. "They think I'm too old, too tired, too blind to fight back. But they don't know me." I pulled on my robe and padded down the hallway, careful not to wake anyone. Mark wasn't living here, but my daughter Lisa was staying the weekend with her kids. She'd been fussing about my health, insisting I shouldn't be alone. I wondered now if her sudden attention was coincidence, or collusion. In the kitchen, the moonlight fell across the oak table where so many family dinners had happened. For a second, I saw Robert there again, carving turkey, laughing with the grandkids. I clenched the edge of the table until my knuckles went white. Then I sat down, pulled out a notepad from the drawer, and began to write. Not a confession. Not a plea. A plan. They wanted me weak. They thought draining my account would force me to beg, to crawl to them for mercy. But money wasn't just numbers on a screen. It was proof of a lifetime of work. Proof I wasn't done yet. I wrote 3 words across the top of the page: freeze, trace, reclaim. Tomorrow, I would go to the bank in person. Not with fear in my eyes, but with fire. I knew people there. Old friends, tellers I had baked cookies for, managers I had seen rise from clerks. They knew me not as some frail old woman, but as Ruth Chandler, the widow who had never let life take more than she could give. And Mark? My own flesh and blood? He thought he'd outsmarted me. He thought betrayal was invisible in the dark. But daylight was coming, and with it, a reckoning he would never forget. For now, I folded the notepad, slipped it under Robert's picture, and turned off the light. My hands were steady at last. Because this wasn't the night I lost everything. This was the night I began to take it all back. The bank lobby smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh coffee when I walked in the next morning, clutching my handbag like it was the last anchor I had. The sun had barely risen, casting long stripes of pale light across the marble floor. I'd barely slept, but exhaustion wasn't what showed on my face, it was focus. A young man at the counter greeted me with a smile that faltered when he saw my eyes. Mrs. Chandler, good morning. Do you have an appointment? No appointment, I said, my voice steady but low. I need to see the branch manager. Now. It was amazing how quickly doors opened when you carried the kind of history I did in this town. Within minutes, I was sitting across from George Langley, the branch manager I'd known for 30 years. He'd started as a teller when Robert and I were scraping pennies to open our first savings account. His hair was silver now, his glasses perched low on his nose. Ruth, he said softly. What's going on? You look rattled. I leaned forward, sliding my phone across the desk. The screen lit up with a string of withdrawal alerts, one after another like a row of gravestones. 3.2 million. Gone in 15 minutes. 79 transactions. Explain it to me. George adjusted his glasses and tapped the screen. His brow furrowed deeper with every swipe. Finally, he looked up, his expression grave. This wasn't done by outsiders. Whoever moved this money had verified credentials. Backup codes. The system logged it as authorized. My throat tightened. And who exactly is listed as my authorized user? He hesitated, then turned the monitor so I could see. There it was in black and white. Mark Chandler. My son. My blood. I sat back, the air thick in my lungs. George's voice was gentle. Ruth, I've seen cases like this before. Sometimes families don't. My voice cracked sharp enough to cut him off. Don't call this family. Call it theft. George nodded, his lips pressed thin. You still have options. We can freeze the account. File fraud reports. It will take time, but money leaves a trail. I let the words settle. Money leaves a trail. So did betrayal. By the time I walked out of the bank, the sun was high, and the world bustled around me like nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. My children thought they had pulled off a perfect theft, but I had allies. Old friends. People who remembered Ruth Chandler not as a frail widow, but as a woman who built a life from grit and who wasn't afraid to fight for it. When I got home, Lisa was in the kitchen making sandwiches for her 2 children. She turned, smiling too brightly. Morning, Mom. You're up early. I studied her face, the perfect eyeliner, the cheerful tone. But beneath it, I saw the flicker of nerves. She knew something. Lisa, I said calmly, setting my purse on the counter, have you heard from your brother lately? She paused just a moment too long. No. Why? I stepped closer, lowering my voice so the children wouldn't hear. Because my accounts were emptied last night. Every cent. Mark's name was on the authorizations. And if you're involved, if you knew anything, now is the time to say it. Her hands froze on the bread knife. She blinked, swallowing hard. Mom, I swear I didn't. I mean, I knew he was planning something, but I thought it was just consolidating accounts. Making things easier. He said you agreed. I stared at her until the words sank deep. My daughter, my only girl, had sat at my table while her brother plotted, and she had said nothing. Maybe she hadn't pulled the trigger, but she'd watched him load the gun. You thought wrong, I said, my voice flat. And now you'll see what happens when a mother who's been betrayed decides she's had enough. Her face went pale. Mom. I held up my hand. Not now. Go take care of your children. I'll take care of mine. That evening, I called an old number from the back of my address book. Samuel Pierce, attorney at law. Robert's friend. The man who had handled our will when we had nothing but an old Chevy and a rented house. He answered on the second ring, his voice rich and steady. Ruth Chandler. Well, I'll be damned. How are you, dear? Not well, Samuel, I replied. I need you. And I need you to bring the sharpest teeth you've got. Within 24 hours, I was sitting in his office surrounded by law books and oak furniture. He listened quietly as I laid out the story, the alerts, the authorization logs, Lisa's hesitation. When I finished, he leaned back and steepled his fingers. They've written you off, he said matter-of-factly. They think you're too old, too tired, too scared to fight. Which means they're careless. And careless leaves fingerprints. What do I do? I asked, my voice steady now. He smiled faintly. We build a case. We trace the money. And when the time comes, Ruth, we make sure they choke on the very fortune they thought was theirs. That night, as I walked back into my quiet house, I passed Robert's photograph again. For the first time since the alerts, I didn't feel hollow. I felt sharp. Precise. I whispered to the empty room, they think I'm finished, Robert. But they've forgotten, this is only the beginning. The following week, I moved with the precision of a chess player. My children thought they'd won, but every move they made was another step into the snare I was quietly weaving. Samuel had connected me with a financial forensics expert, a wiry man in his 50s with restless eyes named Victor. He spoke in a clipped tone, efficient, no nonsense. Money leaves a trail, Mrs. Chandler. Every transfer, every withdrawal, every login leaves a footprint. Your son may have thought he was clever, but clever men get sloppy when they think no one is watching. I handed him my phone with the alerts still lined up like tombstones. Then let's make sure every footprint is preserved. Within hours, Victor was inside the system, downloading logs, tracing IP addresses, collecting timestamps. His laptop glowed in the dim of Samuel's office while I sat in the corner, silent, watching the pieces of my life reassemble into something sharp and weaponized. Meanwhile, Lisa's behavior began to unravel at home. She grew jumpy, whispering on late-night calls, her voice carrying down the hall when she thought I was asleep. One night, I overheard her hissing into the phone, "She knows, Mark. She went to the bank. No, she hasn't said anything yet, but she's not just sitting there. I can feel it." My stomach clenched, but I kept walking past her door as though I'd heard nothing. Every confirmation of their guilt was another stone in the wall I was building. The next morning, I brewed my coffee, set the mug on the kitchen table, and pulled out a thick envelope Samuel had given me. Inside were signed affidavits, frozen account notices, and a draft petition for civil fraud. The weight of those papers steadied me more than any weapon could. When Lisa walked in, still in her silk robe, I smiled at her, warm but deliberate. "You've been busy at night," I said casually. She froze. "What do you mean?" "Your phone carries thin walls in this house. I hear more than you think." I let my words hang, then added, "If Mark wants to know how much I've uncovered, he can ask me himself. Until then, you'd better remind him who taught you both to keep records of everything." Her face drained of color. She muttered something about being late and hurried out, nearly tripping over the rug by the door. I almost laughed. Fear suited her. That afternoon, I met Samuel again. He leaned over his desk, voice low. "Ruth, we have enough to push them into court now. Fraud, elder exploitation, attempted theft. But if you want to wait, if you want to play this longer, it will only tighten the noose. I thought of Robert, of the decades we spent building something from nothing, brick by brick. I thought of Mark's smug grin, Lisa's carefully painted face hiding selfish cracks. And I said, no. Let them dig deeper. I want them to choke on the hole they've dug. Samuel's smile was slow but approving. Then we'll watch. Quietly. The trap began with something small, a decoy account. Victor helped me set it up, seeded with just enough funds to look tempting. A modest $150,000, labeled as an untouched emergency reserve. We left it unsecured just enough to bait them in. It took less than a week. At 2:17 a.m. on a Thursday, the account was breached. Same IP address. Same authorization pattern. This time, Victor was waiting. Every keystroke, every click, every transfer request, it was all captured. The next morning, I sat with Samuel while he played the recording. Mark's voice was audible through a background call he had carelessly left connected, bragging to someone about locking down Mom's assets. I felt a cold satisfaction slide through me. Proof. Not just suspicion, not just whispers, proof. Meanwhile, Lisa made her next move. She arrived at the breakfast table with a folder of glossy brochures for retirement villages. She slid them across the table, smiling too brightly. Mom, we've been thinking. Maybe you'd be happier in a place with more activities. More friends your age. Less stress. You deserve comfort. I lifted one of the brochures, scanned the staged photos of laughing seniors around poker tables, and placed it back down. Interesting suggestion, I said mildly. But tell me, Lisa, do these retirement villages also come with access to the residents' bank accounts? Seems like a selling point you'd enjoy. Her smile faltered, then collapsed altogether. She stood abruptly, muttering about errands, and fled the room. That night, I wrote in my journal, something I hadn't done since Robert passed. My handwriting trembled, but the words were firm. They think I am weak. They think I am blind. But they have no idea I am sharpening the knife they placed in my back. The following Sunday, I made a show of attending church as usual. I wore my navy dress, pinned Robert's old cufflink to my collar like a brooch, and greeted neighbors with warm smiles. Lisa and Mark always underestimated the way small towns talk. They thought their schemes were private, but whispers travel faster than money. By the time the service ended, half a dozen people had mentioned seeing Mark's new car, Lisa's sudden shopping sprees, and the way they boasted about upcoming investments. Every detail was a nail in their own coffin. That evening, Victor called me with the results of his trace. Mrs. Chandler, we've confirmed multiple attempted transfers routed through your son's home internet. We also found one request masked through Lisa's workplace. Between the two of them, this isn't just family squabbling. This is organized fraud. I closed my eyes, letting the words sink in. Organized fraud. My own children. But grief no longer had a place in me. Only resolve. I whispered into the phone, my voice cold steel. Good. Now let's make sure when they fall, they never get back up. When I hung up, I looked again at Robert's photograph. This time, I didn't whisper. I spoke aloud, steady and firm. They chose greed. I choose justice. And with that, the next phase began. Revenge isn't loud. Not the kind that lasts. It's paperwork that bites, dates that matter, signatures that hold. It's the sound a stamp makes when it hits an order that says, freeze. Samuel called me at 7 a.m. sharp. Ready? He asked. I've been ready since 3 a.m., I said, staring at the tulips on my table like they were witnesses. We met at his office with Victor already there, jittery from too much coffee and not enough sleep. He slid a thumb drive across the desk as if it were a knife. Everything, he said. IP logs. Screen captures. Audio of your son talking during the breach. The decoy account hit with the same pattern. Timestamps line up with his home router and her office Wi-Fi. I even pulled the device fingerprint from the browser they used. Samuel nodded once, like a judge accepting a verdict he expected. We file today. What do we file? I asked, because I wanted to hear it put in the same simple words that had built my life. Emergency petition for a temporary restraining order, he said. Asset freeze on any account tied to them. Civil fraud. Conversion. Elder exploitation. We'll copy the district attorney and the state securities board. Your son is licensed, at least for the next few hours. By tonight, his book of clients will know more about him than he wants them to. The air felt clearer than it had in weeks. I signed what I needed to sign, printed my name slow and clean, and dated each line like I was laying bricks. When we were done, Samuel gathered the pages, squared the edges with a tap, and said, "Time to serve them." I didn't want a scene in my kitchen or on my porch. I wanted a scene they couldn't control. So we set it at noon in a conference room downtown, the kind with glass walls and too cold air, the kind where people wear suits and fear embarrassment more than God. Samuel's assistant sent the notices by email and courier, polite but firm, "Please appear to discuss the disposition of accounts and documentation." No threats. No drama. Just a room with chairs and a recorder. They came early and loud. Mark wore a navy suit I had never seen and a watch that looked like it wanted to be noticed. Lisa wore a cream blazer and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. They walked in whispering, stopped dead when they saw Victor at the end of the table with his laptop open, and then rolled their eyes as if we were children playing office. "You could have called," Mark said to me, smile slick. "This is overkill." "This is polite," I said, folding my hands. "Overkill is what you did at 3:04 a.m. He blinked. Just once. Lisa's jaw ticked. Samuel pressed the button on a small recorder. "We'll keep a clear record," he said. "For everyone's sake." He began with the simple things. My name. The date. Each person present. He said my age, and I sat a little taller in my chair, because I wanted the number to sound like armor, not weakness. Then he slid a stack of documents toward Mark and Lisa. "Here are copies of the filings made this morning," he said. "Temporary restraining order sought. Asset freeze requested. Civil complaint drafted. Exhibits attached." Mark skimmed the first page, then snorted. "You can't be serious." Victor leaned forward and tapped his laptop. "Play," he said, and his program obeyed. The room filled with the sound I had heard earlier, my son's voice, easy and careless, drifting from some speaker he thought was muted. "Already locked down Mom's assets," the recording said. "Don't worry. She won't feel a thing until the statement hits." Lisa's eyes flicked to Mark. It was quick, but Victor caught it, and so did I. He hit another key. On the screen, a timeline bloomed like a railroad schedule, every transfer station, every click a small black dot. He clicked on one, and it opened to show an IP address, a time, a line that said device, MacBook Pro, and another that said SSID Chandler Home. "Same pattern on the decoy account," Victor said calmly. "Same device. Same network. Same person." Silence. That ugly, thick kind that makes air feel like cloth. Lisa tried first. "You set him up," she said, pointing at me like a child tattling in kindergarten. "You baited him." "I baited a thief," I said. "A thief took the bait. That is not a setup. That's a mirror." Samuel slid 2 more documents forward, paper whispering against paper. "Notice to appear from the State Securities Board," he said, looking at Mark. "And a courtesy copy of the complaint we filed with FINRA. Misappropriation. Unauthorized transactions. You know the words. You just never thought you'd hear them with your name attached." Mark's face changed shape, his smirk melting into something raw. "This is insane. I was consolidating. I had her codes. She gave them to me." "No," I said, my voice so calm it sounded like it belonged to someone else. "Your father and I raised you to return what you borrow. I gave you trust. You kept the keys." I looked at Lisa. "And you stood in my kitchen and passed the hammer while he nailed shut my accounts." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "I never touched a thing. I didn't press any buttons." "You didn't have to," I said. "You just had to look away." A soft knock at the glass wall interrupted us. 2 deputies from the sheriff's office stood there, hats in their hands, faces bored in the way of men who've done their jobs too long to be impressed. Samuel opened the door and greeted them by name. They nodded to me kindly, then turned to Mark and Lisa. "Are you Mark Chandler?" the taller one asked. "And you, Lisa Chandler?" Mark puffed himself up. Who's asking? The deputy didn't blink. Deputy Carson, Sheriff's Office. We have a court order to serve you. He handed over 2 stapled packets with the county seal in blue. Temporary restraining order, effective upon service. No transfers, withdrawals, or changes to any accounts held solely or jointly by Ruth Chandler, directly or indirectly. You will surrender any credentials, keys, tokens, or devices belonging to her within 24 hours. Violation will result in contempt and arrest. Lisa's mouth fell open. You can't freeze our lives. You tried to freeze mine, I said. You almost succeeded. Mark skimmed, then tossed the pages back like they were junk mail. We'll see you in court. You will, Samuel said pleasantly. Probate division at 9 on Friday. Bring your explanations. The judge likes those. They stood. Lisa's chair scraped the floor. Mark leaned over the table toward me, hands flat, voice low. You're making a mistake you can't come back from. I leaned forward too, so he could see my eyes the way I had seen his the day he took his first steps, the day he drove away to college, the day he thought I would hand him my passwords without asking for a receipt. I came back from burying your father, I said. I came back from chemo when my hair fell out in clumps on the kitchen floor. I came back from a winter where the pipes burst and I held pots under the ceiling at 3 a.m. so the water wouldn't ruin the floors. The only thing I'll never come back from is pretending this didn't happen. I held his glare until he looked away. They left with the deputies, papers in hand like bad souvenirs. When the door shut, my knees shook under the table. Samuel slid a glass of water toward me, and I took it with both hands. Breathe, he said softly. I did. It felt like air had been scarce for a long time and suddenly someone had opened a window. We weren't done. Revenge that works has steps. Step 1, notify his clients. Samuel sent a carefully worded letter to a list Victor pulled from public filings. No accusations, just facts. Mr. Mark Chandler is under investigation for misappropriation of funds from a close family member. A temporary restraining order is in place. Please ensure safeguards on your accounts. By afternoon, 2 clients had called the state board to file their own complaints. Pride is expensive. So is panic. Step 2, clawback. The bank's fraud department began the reversal process on the withdrawals that were still in the window. Some wires had already hit holding accounts. Others were stuck midstream with big red flags waving over them. George, the manager, called me at sunset. We've stopped about 800,000, he said, quiet but pleased. Another $500,000 is frozen pending investigation. The rest, we'll chase. I thanked him like he dragged me out of a river. He said, Ruth, I've known you 30 years. We'll get what we can. Step 3, show the town without saying a word. I am not petty, but I'm not above letting light in. I asked the church if I could sponsor the Wednesday night supper in Robert's name. I stood at the end of the line spooning stew and talking about how the foundation we were setting up would help older folks who were being pushed around. I didn't name my children. I didn't have to. People know how to read between lines. The next morning, a retired teacher slipped an envelope into my mailbox with a note, for the start. Inside were 10 $1 bills, crisp and proud. I cried over $10 like it was a fortune. Thursday night, Lisa tried one more time to make me small. She parked crooked in my driveway and marched to the porch with a folder under her arm. I met her at the door but didn't invite her in. She held up the folder like a shield. You're going to ruin us. Do you understand that? College for my kids, our mortgage. Mark's firm might let him go. And for what? For principle. For the truth, I said. And for the next old woman who wakes up to a phone that says someone drained her life while she slept. Tears sprang to her eyes, sudden and ugly. I didn't touch $1, she said, but it sounded like a question she wanted me to answer for her. You stood there and watched, I said. That's what you touched. She swallowed hard and held out the folder. His devices, she said, voice flat. Old laptop. Tokens. Some paperwork. You'll get the rest in the morning. I took the folder without touching her fingers and nodded toward the steps. Thank you for not making me call a deputy. She stared at me a long time, like she wanted to say something that might save her, then turned and walked back to her car. I watched the red taillights fade and felt both younger and older than I had that morning. Friday's hearing was quick and clean. The judge was a small woman with sharp eyes who listened without moving while Samuel laid out the facts as if he were setting a table, a place for each item, nothing extra. When Mark's lawyer tried to suggest I had authorized consolidation, the judge held up a hand. "You have a recording of your client bragging," she said. "You have IP logs from his home and her workplace. You have a decoy account that caught him in the act. Sit down." She signed the freeze with a pen that sang on the page. "Return anything that can be returned," she said to their side without looking up. "Do not move a penny you can't account for. And Mr. Chandler, consider your license suspended until the board completes its review." We filed out under the old courthouse dome, the air cool and bright. Caleb waited on the steps, hands deep in his pockets, face white. He had skipped classes, he said, because I couldn't sit there and pretend I didn't know. He stood in front of me like he was asking permission to breathe. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know how to stop them." "You're not them," I said, and hugged him so hard my ribs complained. "Prove it every day from now on. That's all I ask." He nodded, eyes shining. "I will." That evening, I made banana bread because some victories need butter and cinnamon. I set 2 thick slices on plates, one for me and one for the quiet spot at the end of the table where Robert's picture sits. I poured tea and spoke into my kitchen like it had a memory. "You were right," I told the photo. "Paper wins. Not shouting. Not threats. Paper and people who don't quit." The phone buzzed. A text from George, another $300,000 returned. More pending. We're not done. Then one from Samuel, State Board issued formal notice. He's barred from client access. Public posting Monday. I set the phone down and let the weight of the day settle into my bones. My money wasn't all back. My heart wasn't healed. But the scales had tipped, and they were tipping my way. I went to the window. The tulips out front were opening again, red and stubborn. I touched the glass and smiled, small but real. This wasn't the end. Revenge doesn't end anything worth saving. It just clears the ground. Tomorrow I would plant. The Monday morning headlines did not use Mark's name, but they didn't need to. Local advisor under investigation for misappropriation was enough. The clients who called me used sharper words: betrayal, theft, disgrace. Some wanted to know if I was pressing charges. Others simply said they were moving their accounts. By noon, the firm had posted a statement: "Mr. Chandler is no longer with us." Quiet, cold, final. I sat in my kitchen with the newspaper folded neatly beside my teacup. My phone buzzed again and again, texts from neighbors, voicemails from acquaintances, even one from an old church friend I hadn't spoken to in years. They didn't ask for details. They just said, "We saw. We believe you." For the first time in weeks, I felt my shoulders relax. Lisa sent an email, apologetic, rambling, full of words like stress and pressure. I didn't answer. Apologies are easy when the bills arrive unpaid. Mark, though, stayed silent. Until Tuesday night. I heard the knock just after supper. Steady, not frantic. When I opened the door, he stood on the porch in a wrinkled shirt, his tie loose, his eyes sunken like he hadn't slept in days. He held no folders, no threats, just himself. "Mom," he said, voice breaking. "I lost everything." I didn't step aside. I didn't let him in. I leaned against the frame and waited. "They've frozen the accounts." Lisa moved out. "Caleb won't speak to me." "The firm," his voice cracked. "They're gone. All of them. And I don't know what to do." For a moment, I saw the boy he had been, the one who used to tug on my sleeve and ask for a cookie before supper, the one who begged me to read just one more story at bedtime. But that boy was buried under choices he had made, not ones I had made for him. "You'll figure it out," I said simply. His eyes filled with tears. "You hate me." "No," I answered, calm and steady. "I hate what you did. And I won't save you from it." Silence stretched between us. Finally he whispered, "Goodbye, Mom," and turned away. I watched him walk down the path without calling after him. That was the last time he stood on my porch. But life has a way of filling spaces that betrayal leaves behind. The foundation Samuel and I had drafted began to take root. Letters poured in from widows and retirees, people who had been pressured by children, cousins, in-laws. Their words carried the same weight I had felt, the quiet terror of being erased. With the returned funds, I set up the Chandler Integrity Trust, not for my children, but for those who needed the kind of shield I had built too late. Caleb visited on Saturdays. He brought groceries, carried in wood for the fireplace, and asked about every clause in the documents I signed. "I want to learn," he said one evening. "Not just money but honesty." I looked at him and thought maybe Robert's steadiness had skipped a generation and landed here. Spring turned into summer. The tulips gave way to roses, then to late lilies. The house felt lighter, even when the nights were long. I stopped waiting for calls that never came. I stopped checking for apologies that wouldn't arrive. Instead, I poured my energy into people who understood gratitude, not entitlement. One evening, I hosted a supper at the community hall. Long tables, simple food, laughter that wasn't sharp or cruel. Halfway through the meal, a woman stood and raised her glass. "To Ruth," she said, "for proving that dignity doesn't come with age. It comes with courage." The room erupted with claps and cheers. I felt my cheeks flush, but this time with pride, not shame. Later that night, I sat on my porch, a shawl wrapped around my shoulders, the sky streaked with the last light of day. I thought of Robert, of the life we built, of the son we raised. I thought of everything lost and everything saved. And then I thought of tomorrow, of planting more, giving more, standing taller. Because in the end, revenge wasn't just about freezing accounts or winning in court. It was about reclaiming what mattered most, my voice, my peace, my future. And as the stars blinked awake overhead, I whispered into the night, "You didn't break me. You never will."